Here in New York City, a sweeping corruption crackdown launched by the FBI and NYPD.
Drug Enforcement Administration just announced its largest meth bust in U.S. history.
It wasn't called a home, it was called a compound. 14 acres behind a reinforced perimeter wall in the low desert hills 40 minutes east of Tucson, Arizona. A main residence, a detached guest house converted into a private office suite. A third structure listed on county records as a climate-controlled agricultural storage facility, which had never stored a single bale of hay. Motion-activated cameras every 30 feet along the wall. Infrared sensors embedded in the gravel approach road. A steel gate with biometric access. The kind of gate that does not open for anyone who hasn't pressed a thumb to the reader and received a green light. The kind of property that tells you its owner has spent considerable time thinking about what stays hidden. At 4:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in late October, none of that mattered. FBI agents came through the main gate under a federal search warrant issued by a magistrate judge sitting in a sealed courtroom in the District of Columbia, 3 jurisdictions removed from the congressman's home district. The biometric lock on the gate had been bypassed using a technical override obtained through legal process 6 days earlier, held under seal, shared with no local law enforcement, no congressional staff, no one outside the operational chain of command at the FBI's Phoenix field office, and the Justice Department's Public Integrity section in Washington. The compound's alarm system registered the breach. No notification was sent. No private security firm was alerted. That had been arranged 48 hours before the operation, through a sealed court order compelling the security provider to suspend outbound alerts for a defined window. The provider complied. They had no choice. A federal judge had told them to. Inside the main residence, a sitting member of the United States House of Representatives, a 4-term congressman representing Arizona's 7th district, was taken into custody at 4:51 in the morning. He was in a bathrobe. He did not resist. He said one sentence to the agents as they secured his hands behind his back, a sentence that the lead agent noted in his field report, but that has not been made public. The arrest warrant listed his name and 4 initial counts: bribery, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, and failure to file accurate financial disclosures as required under the Ethics in Government Act. Those 4 counts were what the investigation had been built to support over 26 months of sustained federal work. They were not what the investigation would ultimately be about. The search of the compound took 11 hours. 43 FBI personnel participated, including forensic accountants, digital forensics specialists, a hazardous materials assessment team, and 2 agents from the DEA's Tucson division who had been embedded in the operation under a joint task force agreement signed 9 months earlier. The DEA's involvement had not been public. Its relevance would become clear by midday. For the first 5 hours, the search produced what the investigation expected: financial records in the office suite, hard drives, a laptop not previously identified in any communications intercept, paper files organized in labeled binders that corresponded, almost exactly, to the financial architecture investigators had spent 2 years mapping from the outside. The congressman had kept clean records of his own arrangements. Then, at approximately 9:40 in the morning, an FBI forensic team working in the 3rd structure, the one listed as agricultural storage, requested the on-site team leader come to their location immediately. The structure was not a storage facility. It had been professionally converted. The interior walls were finished drywall. The floor was poured concrete sealed with epoxy. There was climate control, a dedicated electrical panel, and a communications conduit running underground back to the main residence. Inside were 2 rooms. The first contained server equipment, 3 rack-mounted units connected to a satellite uplink that was not registered to any known internet service provider. The second room contained a floor safe, a Browning Pro Steel unit bolted to the concrete foundation, concealed beneath a section of removable flooring that had been cut and fitted to appear seamless. Opening that safe required a second call to the duty magistrate in Washington. The order was issued at 10:12 in the morning. A federal locksmith brought to the site specifically for contingencies like this one opened the safe at 10:31. What was inside the safe did not match anything the 26-month investigation had been built to find. And what was inside it is why, within 72 hours, the case against the congressman stopped being a public corruption prosecution and became something significantly larger, something that placed the FBI, the DEA, ICE, and the Department of Homeland Security into a joint operational posture, that senior officials at the Justice Department described in internal communications, later referenced in court filings as unprecedented for a case originating from a congressional corruption inquiry. The investigation that led to the compound had started not with the congressman but with money. 26 months before the raid, analysts at the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network flagged a pattern of transactions flowing through a series of limited liability companies registered in Arizona, Nevada, and Delaware. The amounts were structured, the timing was regular. The destination accounts were layered behind holding entities that, when investigators began pulling the corporate filings, resolved back to a cluster of real estate investments, a private logistics company operating freight routes between Tucson and the border town of Nogales, and a family trust controlled by the congressman's wife. None of those entities appeared on the congressman's mandatory financial disclosures. Federal law requires members of Congress to report financial interests, income sources, and asset holdings annually. The congressman had filed every required disclosure on time for 8 consecutive years. None of them mentioned the logistics company. None of them mentioned the LLCs in Nevada or Delaware. None of them mentioned the trust's connection to federal contract revenue that investigators would eventually trace back to a defense services subcontractor doing work under an appropriations line item that the congressman's subcommittee directly oversaw. The financial map took 7 months to build. It was intricate. It was not, investigators would later acknowledge, immediately obvious. The money moved through legitimate-seeming channels. It passed through real bank accounts at real institutions. It was reported on tax returns filed by the entities involved, though the returns themselves contained material omissions that the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, brought into the case at month 8, would later characterize as systematic underreporting designed to obscure the origin and purpose of the funds. At month 9, the investigation received authorization for communications intercepts. What those intercepts captured, over the following 5 months, was a congressman who spoke carefully. He used prepaid phones rotated on a schedule. He referenced financial matters in language that was elusive rather than explicit. He mentioned individuals by first name only, or by nicknames that investigators spent weeks matching to real identities. But he made mistakes. Everyone does. At month 14, in a conversation intercepted on a prepaid device the congressman believed was clean, he spoke with an individual the FBI had already identified as a mid-level financial facilitator, connected to the Sinaloa cartel's money laundering infrastructure, operating in the American Southwest. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. Its content, described in the eventual superseding indictment in summary form, concerned the timing of a payment and the need to ensure that a shipment would not be examined at a specific point along a specific route. That conversation is what brought the DEA into the investigation, and the DEA brought context that the FBI's Public Corruption Unit had not possessed. The logistics company connected to the congressman's wife's trust was not merely a freight operation. According to DEA intelligence developed through a separate, ongoing investigation into Sinaloa cartel supply chains operating through the Nogales corridor, the company's trucks had been identified on at least 11 occasions moving along routes that coincided with known narcotics transportation patterns. The company's manifests listed agricultural equipment, building materials, restaurant supply goods. DEA analysts who reviewed the manifests against the actual cargo weights recorded at commercial weigh stations along Interstate 19 found discrepancies, consistent discrepancies. The trucks were heavier than their listed cargo could account for. The DEA had not previously connected the logistics company to the congressman. The FBI had not previously connected the congressman to narcotics trafficking. The intersection of those two investigative threads, at month 14 of a 26-month investigation, is what transformed the case. Now here is what was in the safe. Federal evidence logs filed with the court describe the contents in precise terms. Approximately $480,000 in United States currency, bundled in rubber-banded stacks of mixed denominations, consistent with accumulation over an extended period rather than a single withdrawal event. 3 prepaid cellular phones, all powered off, none registered to any identity known to investigators. A leather folio containing handwritten documents in a script that FBI forensic document examiners would later confirm, through comparison with known exemplars, as the congressman's own handwriting. And a USB drive. The handwritten documents in the folio were, in the assessment of federal prosecutors who reviewed them over the 72 hours following the raid, A personal operational record. Not a diary, not a journal. A ledger of activity. Dates, dollar amounts, route designations, names written in a personal shorthand that investigators spent days decoding, and references to shipments that, when cross-referenced with DEA intelligence on Sinaloa cartel logistics in the Arizona corridor, matched specific narcotics transportation events that the DEA had tracked but had never been able to attribute to a coordinating authority on the American side of the border. The congressman had been that coordinating authority. According to his own records, he had documented delivery schedules. He had noted payments received and payments dispersed. He had recorded the names, in his own shorthand, of the individuals on both sides of the border who made the operation function. He had kept a private handwritten account of his role in a narcotics distribution network that the DEA estimated, based on the volume indicators in the ledger and corroborating intelligence, moved between 800 and 1,200 kilograms of cocaine and an estimated 2.1 million fentanyl pills through the Nogales corridor over a period of approximately 3 years. He kept this record in a safe, in a hidden room, in a building listed as agricultural storage, on a 14-acre compound in the Arizona desert. He kept it because people who manage complex illegal operations need records. They need to know who was paid, when, how much, and for what. They need to reconcile accounts. They need to verify that what was promised was delivered. The congressman ran his side of the operation the way he ran his congressional office, with documentation, with organization, with the bureaucratic discipline of a man who believed in keeping track of things. That discipline is now the government's primary exhibit. The USB drive compounded the damage. Its contents, encrypted using commercial-grade software, required FBI technical analysts 72 hours to decrypt under a court order authorizing compelled access to digital storage media seized under the warrant. The decrypted files contained spreadsheets, scanned documents, photographs of physical locations along the border corridor, and communications records that did not appear on any device previously examined during the investigation. The communications records included exchanges with individuals the FBI and DEA identified as Sinaloa cartel logistics coordinators operating on the Mexican side of the border. They included references to payments made to law enforcement personnel, not by name, but by badge number and jurisdiction. Federal investigators, working with the DHS Office of Inspector General, cross-referenced those badge numbers and identified 4 active-duty U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers and 2 Pima County Sheriff's deputies whose patrol assignments, when mapped against the shipment dates in the congressman's ledger, showed a pattern. On dates when shipments moved through the corridor, those officers were either off-duty, assigned to unrelated sectors, or had logged patrol routes that took them physically away from the transit points used by the logistics company's trucks. That pattern is not proof by itself. Patrol assignments are made by supervisors based on staffing needs and operational priorities. Officers rotate sectors regularly. The correlation could be coincidental. Federal prosecutors are not treating it as coincidental. The 6 officers identified through the badge numbers on the USB drive were placed on administrative leave within 1 week of the superseding indictment. 3 of them have since been served with federal target letters indicating they are subjects of a grand jury investigation. The congressman's own records did this. His own meticulous, organized, carefully maintained records documented not only his personal corruption but the infrastructure that made it possible. The border officers who may have facilitated the shipments, the financial facilitators who moved the money, the cartel contacts who supplied the narcotics, the logistics company that carried them, the shell entities that laundered the proceeds. All of it referenced, all of it indexed in his own handwriting or on his own encrypted drive, all of it found in a safe that he had every reason to believe would never be opened by anyone but himself. He was wrong about that by 26 months of federal work. The superseding indictment filed 11 days after the raid added 14 counts to the original 4. Narcotics conspiracy, conspiracy to import controlled substances, money laundering, structuring financial transactions to evade reporting requirements, conspiracy to commit bribery of public officials, a charge that encompasses the alleged payments to the border officers documented on the USB drive, an account under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the RICO statute, alleging that the congressman operated and managed an enterprise engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity connected to the Sinaloa cartel's narcotics distribution network in the southwestern United States. A RICO count against a sitting member of Congress. Federal legal scholars contacted by national publications in the days after the superseding indictment was filed described the charge as almost without precedent in modern American political history. The political response followed the pattern that Washington has rehearsed many times, but it broke faster than usual. The initial indictment had produced the standard choreography: a statement of innocence from the congressman's office, suspension of committee assignments by the House Speaker, carefully neutral statements from colleagues. The Ethics Committee announced a formal inquiry. The superseding indictment broke that choreography in under 48 hours. The RICO charge, the narcotics conspiracy, the alleged cartel connection, the compromised border officers. The scale of what the safe had documented, none of it could be managed with procedural distance and calibrated statements. 7 staff members resigned within 5 days. The congressman's chief of staff, who had served in the role for 3 terms, resigned by email on a Sunday evening with no public statement. The congressman's campaign treasurer filed a notice with the Federal Election Commission terminating his role. 3 of the congressman's largest donors, including a Tucson-based construction firm that had contributed to every campaign cycle, issued public statements withdrawing support. One of those statements used the phrase irreconcilable with public trust. In the political economy of a congressional career, the first donor withdrawal is a signal. The second is confirmation. The third is a verdict delivered before any jury has been seated. The congressman's defense attorneys, retained within days of the initial arrest, have entered a plea of not guilty on all counts. They have filed motions challenging the scope of the search warrant, the admissibility of the safe's contents, and the legal basis for the RICO charge. Those motions will be litigated. The adversarial process will function as designed. The congressman is entitled to the presumption of innocence, to challenge the government's evidence, and to present his defense before a jury of his peers. None of that changes what was in the safe before anyone opened it. $480,000 in cash, 3 prepaid phones, a handwritten ledger documenting years of narcotics logistics coordination, a USB drive containing encrypted records of cartel communications, financial flows, and badge numbers of allegedly compromised law enforcement officers. All of it kept by a sitting member of Congress in a hidden room in a compound in the Arizona desert, maintained with the organizational discipline of a man who understood exactly what he was managing and believed he would never be caught managing it. The broader question this case poses is not about one congressman. It is about what exists alongside the visible exercise of political power in this country. The floor votes, the committee hearings, the constituent town halls, the campaign fundraisers. All of it visible, all of it part of the public record. What the safe documented, according to federal prosecutors, is what existed alongside that record: the cartel logistics, the structured payments, the compromised officers, the narcotics moving through a corridor that the congressman's own position gave him unique ability to influence and protect. A visible career and a hidden operation, maintained simultaneously by the same individual for years. 26 months of investigation built the financial case from the outside. What the safe provided, from the inside, was something investigators rarely receive: a subject's own comprehensive documentation of the conduct they are accused of. The case was strong before the safe was opened. After it was opened, the case did not merely grow stronger, it grew wider. It revealed connections the investigation had not reached. It identified individuals the investigation had not named. It expanded a corruption case into a national security matter involving cartel infiltration of American political infrastructure. The fentanyl that moved through the corridor the congressman allegedly managed has a destination. It reaches communities. It reaches families. 2.1 million pills is not an abstraction. It is a count of individual doses, each one capable of killing a person who takes it without understanding what it contains. The congressman's ledger tracked those shipments as line items: revenue, logistics, schedule. The human cost of what those line items represent does not appear in the ledger. It never does. The trial is expected to begin in the coming months. The legal process will determine the congressman's guilt or innocence on each count. The evidence will be tested. The defense will be heard. The system will work as it is designed to work. But the safe was in the floor. The room was behind a false listing. The compound was behind a wall. And inside all of it, a congressman kept the private record of what he could never allow the public to see. Federal agents found it. That record is now the government's exhibit, and no legal strategy changes what was inside the safe before anyone opened it. If this story held your attention, take 1 second and tap like so that more people see it. If you believe accountability should follow power no matter where it hides, leave the word expose in the comments. Share this so it reaches someone who needs to hear it. And remember, this story is fictional, a dramatization inspired by real issues, created for storytelling purposes only. But the questions it raises about power, secrecy, and the cost of silence are ones that belong to all of us.